I'm Amy Goodman, host of Democracy Now! You're watching Seriously Now here on Marin TV.
Hello, I'm Jill Lessard. Welcome to the May edition of Seriously Now. This month, we have an in-studio interview with Michael Eisenmenger, the Executive Director of the Community Media Center of Marin, who will bring us up to speed on how he secured funding to keep the cameras of Marin TV rolling. Also on the program, a profile piece I produced about lifelong Marin resident and prolific sign maker Daniel Giddings, who'll share some of his professional misadventures and personal passions. I'm Jill Lessard, Director of Operations at the Community Media Center of Marin. And here with me in the Marin TV studios is my boss, Michael Eisenmenger, the Executive Director of the Community Media Center of Marin. Recently, the Marin Telecommunications Agency voted to approve $605,000 of funding to CMCM. Michael is here to explain what that was all about, how it affects CMCM, and what's in store for the future. But before he does that, we're going to watch a video that was produced by staffers at the Community Media Center of Marin and explains what the center is all about.
I was first introduced to CMCM through the media committee of the League of Women Voters.
I came down here really at first when Michael Eisenmenger was hired because he brought an Anycast, a little multi-camera switching unit. And I think it's just vital that we're able to go out into the community and do events. Television, community television doesn't always happen in the studio here. It happens out in the real world.
I first found out about the CMCM through my college of Marin classes. People were talking about them and said this was a good resource. So I checked it out, came down, went to the orientation, and ever since then.
I'm really impressed with the classes that are offered here. I mean, everything from studio production to location, multiple camera production to single camera field production to Final Cut Pro editing, and there's even some workshops in script writing and a number of different things that are specific. Clinics to help people improve their skills. I use the Media Center right now for a variety of different projects. I do some stuff for the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, some interview shows here. I do some projects for the League of Women Voters. Here, if you have an idea, you can grab a camera, you can go out and shoot, or you can come in the studio and shoot, or you can go out to the Anycast and come back in and post it on Final Cut Pro, and you can get on the air without going through tons and tons of obstacles. It really makes the time between a concept that's in your mind and the reality that's on the screen very short.
We have a beautiful facility that's up to speed with the latest equipment, and I think it gives everyone in the community an opportunity to be an artist and to really have video equipment to tell their story.
The Media Center is important in my life because I'm here every day, if not every other day. I come down a lot, check out cameras at least once a week. I'm on the computers, editing. I'm also interning here, so it's a great opportunity for me to learn.
Say, walk through the doors and come to one of the orientations. You'll see that just for a few dollars, the opportunity that you have, it'll expand your horizons and give you the skill level to do anything you want.
It's really one of my communities now. It's one of the few communities in several parts of my life that I enjoy the people here. I enjoy the interaction of the young people and the older folks that have been around, and the enthusiasm and the creativity, and it really has become a part of what I do and who I am these days.
We went around to all the councils, and it was partly to educate the city councils on what the Media Center has been doing since it was founded 5 years ago, and letting them know who we are, how we can grow, and why we needed their support at that time. So it was part of a lot of discussions that have gone on for well over 2 years to settle a new contract between the Marin Telecommunications Agency and CMCM on moving forward with enough of a budget so we can meet the demands of our public education and governmental responsibilities.
How do you explain why these funds were needed in the first place?
That's a little complicated without going into the deep history of PEG television, public access in Marin County. But basically, when the MTA negotiated a franchise with Comcast, as well as other cable providers, but Comcast is the largest provider, they initially negotiated a local franchise that received a certain amount of startup funds, but not enough funds going forward. It was a 10-year contract. So there weren't enough funds in that agreement in order to keep a center and 3 public education and governmental channels alive for that period of time. So our first recommendation when we started was for the MTA to abrogate or transfer to the state video franchise, which would have created a 1% set aside in the PEG fees that are paid for by cable subscribers. And we felt that would have been enough of a budget to go forward. Most centers like this, there's hundreds around the country like this, they're all supported by the PEG fees that are paid for by the cable subscribers themselves. Subscribers pay a small PEG fee, which can range anywhere from 1 to 3 to 4%, and then they all pay what's called a franchise fee, and that's a 5% fee assessed by the cable company but paid for by subscribers, and it passes through to the cities. City franchise fees become part of the general operating budget of the cities. They love that funding. It's a fairly reliable source of annual funding, and they can be used for anything. Our difficulty was in that transfer to the state franchise. Comcast balked and stalled and bluffed, which is what big cable operators do, and managed to create a settlement between the MTA and Comcast. And the terms of the settlement was that we would only receive half of those PEG fees, half of 1% rather than the full 1%, through 2017 or 18. We're still not certain yet. So that created a deficit, and we needed to go to the cities to request some bridge funding to fill that gap in this 4-year period. And that's what we've done, and MTA just voted in their last meeting to approve that bridge funding. And it's not an ample amount of funding. It's not funding that's going to let the center grow, but it's funding that's going to let us survive until we can begin receiving the full 1% PEG fees.
Now, certainly the last few months, if not the last year, has really had the Community Media Center of Marin operating under a bit of a dark cloud. I wondered if, you saw any silver lining whatsoever, especially going around to the different towns and cities and educating and enlightening them about who we are and what we do.
Yeah, I mean, the center's actually had funding uncertainty since the beginning. This wasn't anything new, so we were pretty much accustomed to these crisis budgets. I think what was necessary for us establishing a new center was to, first make it viable, create a model that provided value both to the cities and to all the people who come and use the services, but also grow, and in order to gain credibility and visibility, it takes time. And, I think our first 3 years were really about building that infrastructure and that visibility. And then we could safely go to the cities and solicit their support so that we can go forward. So yeah, that cloud's always been there. This is actually the first time where the center has a definite future going forward. So, considering we're winding down our 5th year of operations, it's a major milestone to have stable funding, for the foreseeable future. And that's a great thing. So we're really happy that the cities view us as a partner and have been willing to support us in this way. And we're very committed to the cities as well. We've been providing a lot of city services. A lot of people probably don't realize it, but we're actually, if you turn on Channel 27, the government channel, Fairfax, Sausalito, San Rafael, Mill Valley, we purchase and install the equipment in those locations. We're in the process of wiring Larkspur and San Anselmo now, and then we'll have 3 remaining members. So by the end of this fiscal year, we could have as many as 8 of the 11 members of the MTA on the channel, and that's something that we've done purely out of the PEG fees that we receive. So that's a major accomplishment. I don't know there's no other PEG center in the country that's doing that level of work and delivering that kind of value to the cities that they serve.
So many organizations and individuals benefit from the Community Media Center of Marin. I wondered if you got a sense when you were doing this tour and going out into these communities and city council meetings, did people show up to show how much they support the center?
We did. We didn't solicit a lot of participation in those meetings, but at each stop along the way, there were always a number of individuals who came out and voiced their support, people from the nonprofit community, individuals, residents, some of whom worked here, some of whom are just viewers, and they consider this kind of non-commercial civic media to be something that's really important to them and to Marin County as a whole. So that was very gratifying. We didn't try to turn out hundreds of people in these council meetings because this wasn't a confrontational or combative exercise. It was really, I kind of view it as an educational tour. We're really going out to educate the councils. And that's going to be an ongoing process, and it actually is something we're constantly doing, both with city governments, county governments, but also with the schools. We're working more and more with K-12 schools and colleges and universities, and with residents. As you know, you have people come in every month for orientations, and many of them are just finding out about the center, and they want to come in and find out how they can get involved and what services are available.
Now, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I just want to reiterate that the center got approved for $605,000 in funding, but this is $165,000 less than what you had originally asked for, which was bare minimum of what was necessary to keep this place moving forward. So how are you going to make up the difference, and can the community help?
That's true. We had, in our negotiations, and this dates back almost 18 months, but we were asked to come up with kind of a bare bones budget, which we did, and then the funding support eventually came in under that. And we'll have to make up the difference somehow. We'll do that, through donations, perhaps, through fundraising, perhaps through a little bit of grant writing, although that tends to be programmatically separate from general operating. And it may impact on some of our capital replacement, which is a big part of this cost. One of the big reasons we had to go ask for support is, we're reaching 5 years. All of this equipment, our master control equipment, it all needs to be replaced in 3 to 7 year cycles. So we're at a point where we have to, and it's not so much upgrading for, the newest, latest flashy thing. It's upgrading so that we stay on the air, so the channels stay on the air. So when people come in to use the facility, and when we're providing services to governments and schools, that the equipment works. So that's a big part of the cost. We'll see what we can do over this bridge period. It definitely means the center's not going to grow. We'll have to continue to find efficiencies of scale and ways to work with less, more with, less is more, so to speak. And we've pretty much done that from the beginning, so we'll continue that. But it is a challenge, and if people want to support us, we do have on our website, donor campaigns. You can jump on board. We have an exciting underwriting campaign for local businesses to gain a little visibility on the channel and let the residents of Marin County know that they support non-commercial, micro-local, public media. This isn't supporting a huge PBS affiliate. This is supporting the television in your hometown.
Through this whole process, I think there's been some misinformation that's been disseminated by the media. One thing that comes to mind was some sort of insinuation that we are funded through taxpayer dollars, for example. Can you address what you think of the biggest misconception and clarify that for people?
Yeah, a lot of people, there's usually two misconceptions. One is people think that the cable companies, Comcast, are supporting the center, which they're not. Again, the PEG fees are a subscriber fee, which is actually a ratepayer fee that's attached to the cable bill. And it's currently 1% of the cable television portion of your bill. So, if you have triple play, that would break down to roughly, about 33 cents a month, that would go, would be 1% of PEG fees. So it's not the cable company that's paying it. The Comcast has not put a dime into this place. It's come entirely from the ratepayers. And it's not a tax because it's a service fee. So if you don't subscribe to cable, you're not paying it. But that's where the support actually comes from. The cities are now providing us with supplemental support for that, which is great. That's a huge vote of confidence. But it's not a tax. When cable first came into existence, it was created as it was actually the first medium that created a sustainable form of public participation. The sort of virtual or digital soapbox, so to speak. And it did that through the use of PEG fees. The franchise fees, which go to the city, are a form of right-of-way tax. It's so that cable operators have access to the right-of-way. That's a public space. It's being rented, more or less, to the cable operators, and the franchise fee is the rent. The PEG fees were something that cities could choose to negotiate for, depending on the needs of the community, and they could request additional amounts be set aside for those purposes: public education, governmental, television. And it goes far beyond television, as you know, because people are here doing all sorts of digital media, online media. People come here primarily for training and access to tools that they might not otherwise be able to afford. A lot of people say, why are we paying for this? There's YouTube. And while that's true, YouTube and Google don't come into your community and train you how to use these tools. They don't give you access to the tools, and they don't give you a multitude of distribution options, in which to reach your community locally, as well as to reach out nationally and internationally.
Well, we could do a whole series about the Community Media Center of Marin, but we'll have to wrap it up for now. I just want to thank you so much, not just for clarifying what has been going on the last 6 months to a year, but for your hard work and hard-earned victory in securing these funds. I
think all the staff have played an important part, and an equal part, as well as our members who have come in and they've supported us. So, for those of you that have been concerned, we're almost out of the woods.
Michael Eisenmenger, Executive Director of the Community Media Center of Marin, thank you so much. I'm Jill Lessard.
To be interviewed about sign painting, to feel inspired, that's a good question. Every conceivable need for the commercial world requires a sign to identify itself. And that had to go back to a name on a dwelling, say, where you lived, and you want to tell who was there, so you would put your name on your property. It was an identification to help you bring your trade to the public's awareness, either where you lived or where you worked. I spent many years on ornamental gold leaf work for all types of businesses, lawyers' offices, art galleries, many types of formal businesses, office doors that required gold leaf, and also many years on gold leafing on the transoms of luxury yachts. The sign man can do the most beautiful job on painting an art gallery sign, and there might be some sign man that comes up and says, oh, that's a nice piece of work. But the public that's looking at it, all they want to do is find out where the artwork is. So it's like, that's what I say, it's still a sign. On the Lagunitas Market in Lagunitas, on the west wall, there's remnants of a sign that says Lucas Valley Dairy milk cream with a pictorial of a milk carton. I did that in the 1960s period. I never enjoyed wall lettering. I spent years on scaffolding, 4 or 5, 6 stories high, hanging by my teeth. Corrugated walls, corrugated trucks, a rough stucco. You had tools of the trade to go over surfaces like that, but it was a nightmare, and you had to avoid spilling on those things because it would take you a long time to wipe off mistakes. The largest sign I ever did was on the rooftop of the Industrial Center building, Sausalito. The letters were 24 feet tall, and I believe that the whole length of that roof was 360 feet long. And we accidentally dropped a can of aluminum paint on the roof, which rolled down the roofing, fell off the edge of the roof. We had to let that dry and mix up our green paint to match that spill. The worst experience I had was misspelling signs, 2 in particular, on rough stucco walls on scaffolding about 3 stories high, and to have misspelled the name. I left out the H of the word Anchorage. I had done 2 walls fine, but I guess it was in the afternoon when I was sidetracked by something, and I laid out and started lettering this thing, and when I got to the end of the wall, I fell short, and I looked down the wall, and I said, uh-oh, I left out H in Anchorage. We had to let that dry, and we had to paint the whole wall, prime it, and finish coat it again to execute it. Years ago, there was a TV firm in San Francisco that hired me to take 4th Street in Petaluma, the entire block, and antique all the signs on the windows, the projecting signs, to fit this era, that they were coming up with a vintage advertising campaign with actors and all the personnel involved. So I did that. That was kind of enjoyable. It was like a little stimulation of this is out of the ordinary, because it had to do with another medium, TV. One thing I'll have to admit, I was always interested in vintage alphabets and vintage sign making, both on wood and on reverse glass. That was enjoyable to me, to do things for that particular purpose. If somebody asked me to do a demonstration art exhibit of my ability to letter backwards on glass, both in painted and in gilding, I enjoy doing them at my own pace, for my own pleasure, and to have them hanging in the gallery. But as you can see, they're still hanging in my shop, so there they are. When I had the shops in town, mainly in the Center Phil area, and those industrial parks that I used to rent my buildings from, I had a great sigh of relief coming over White's Hill here and coming into the valley and getting involved with my garden and the landscaping back in those years. That was, like, I would say that's the mainstay of enjoyment, was working in our garden. And it was a good physical outlet from hours at the blasted easel. As far as enjoying myself, for years I dove for abalone with the group up and down the California coast. So I decided to use my skills, and I designed, this is one of 7 illustrations of experiences in the kelp beds up off the coast up here, is taking abalone. So years and years of diving for abalone. You bring them back. The limit back in those days was 5. I think it's 3 now. And we'd bring them back and prepare them. And we had some wonderful abalone feeds here, as well as spearing fish. We'd bring fresh fish speared that day, and the abalone back for wonderful abalone feeds. I put these up here to show you what the kids are doing. I'm not in the commercial world anymore. Most of the signs companies in Marin County, all over the Bay Area, are computerized signs. You know, sign makers. You don't see too many sign painters. Computerized signage can meet deadlines a lot quicker than hand-loaded signs. They're able to just put it into their machine and pop them out. I enjoyed the ability that I could do this stuff by hand, from the ground up. All the good signmen I've ever talked to end up with an attitude like this. Even though they knock themselves out to be really good at their craft, they all end up with, what would you call it, cynical? I hate to burst your bubble.
That'll do it for this edition of Seriously Now. Thank you so much for opening your minds and inviting us in.